Now, you and I think, are different in many aspects. I'm a conservative Orthodox Jew living in Israel and basically think that Israel is the good side in the story, and you couldn't be farther away. But I think that we share many things in common in our, in what we want to strive. We strive for a better world, and we want to make the world a better place. And I will even say that this is a Jewish thing, like tikkun olam, make the world a better place. And I wonder what the things that distinguish us. And I came to what I think is the Thomas Sowell conflict of vision. Is this what distinguishes us? Am I in the constrained theory and you are in the unconstrained? So how could we both seek for the same thing, make the world a better place, and so profoundly different in many aspects of life?
We're both human beings. We share many things, like the language capacity, like moral capacities. Turns out when you study comparative moral systems, and in fact study children's moral judgments, you find many commonalities. There's fundamental principles that seem to be very widely shared in the human species. Now, when you then come to actual real life situations, many other factors intervene, and you may reach different judgments, but even with the same moral principles based on your different interpretation of the phenomena around you, the events around you, the experiences, your own history, your own culture, and so on. So many different factors intervene to determine how we perceive things, how we react, how we interpret things, even though we're fundamentally the same. That's true of what are called physical characteristics too. You look different than I do, but from the point of view of an ape, we're identical. Just like when we look at two chimpanzees, we can't tell the difference between them. They're just chimpanzees. Chimpanzees can tell the difference. They see a lot of difference.
And I can tell, and I can say that you are not familiar with the facts, or neither do I know not familiar with the facts. In other words, when I hear you discuss, for example, the US foreign policy or the Israeli-Palestine conflict, you are well established in the facts. You know the facts. So it's not that you or I are missing very important facts. Listen, but you didn't know about ABC. You know the facts, but I think that something is profoundly different in the way you look at things. And it strikes me as hell because in Israel, yes, the name Noam Chomsky is a notoriously famous name, okay? And my grandfather always told me, if someone loves you, he will critique you. And I think that this is what you do, yes? If you love someone, you critique him because you want him to be better. And this is what my grandfather told me. Now, my question is, can I take the analogy of my grandfather and apply it to you? So listen, I am part of the Jewish people. I love the Jewish people. I love the state of Israel. Therefore, I am one of the harshest critics because I want it to be better. It is not sufficiently good as I see what it should be. Or it is a completely different story from your perspective.
Why is it different?
No. I ask, no, because I think that the question is, do I critique from love? Listen, I love you, therefore I want you to be better, ABC. You should do this better. And I think that we know that critics or that comes from love is different than critics that come from I don't care.
What is it that you love, the state of Israel?
You ask me?
Yeah.
Wow, this is a great question. And first, it's my house. First, it's my home. It's not house, it's home. And second, I think as an Orthodox and a religious Jew, I think, and I want to believe, that the state of Israel is here to express something good for the world, to say, listen, this is how we should behave. This is God's place on earth. This is light upon to the nations. Now, we are not there yet. Absolutely. We are not light upon the nations yet. But I think that what the Jewish people need to do is to strive to be light upon to the nations. Okay? And I think that we are heading in this direction.
Well, first of all, we have to distinguish the Jewish people from the state of Israel. Okay?
Definitely.
So, let's be clear. To love a state is paganism. I had a long, I'm sure you knew, Yeshayahu Leibovitz.
Yeah, definitely.
I had a very long discussion with him about this, must have been 30 years ago, 25 years ago. He regarded, like you, he was an Orthodox Jew. He regarded love for the state of Israel as a disgrace, paganism. You don't love states. He regarded that as a deep disgrace of the modern Jewish people. And, but he, nevertheless, his dedication to Israel was total. Cared
Definitely.
Nothing about the Palestinians, only about Jewish rights. He was very much like my grandfather from the shtetl in that respect. Is it good for the Jews is the only thing that matters. Didn't care about Palestinians, didn't care about anyone else. But he didn't love the state. In fact, he, in many ways, I wouldn't say despised, but was certainly deeply critical of the state. So these are distinctions we have to make. I don't think we should love states. I don't love the United States as a state. I don't love the state of Israel. I don't love the state of France or any other one. You shouldn't love states.
Yes, but it's like that you say that I don't love the flag because the flag is just a piece of cloth. And you are absolutely right. The flag is just a piece of cloth. But what we say about the flag is what this piece of cloth represents to us. Usually, yes. It's not that the piece of cloth is meaningful, is the meaning that we imply to the piece of cloth. Would you agree?
So you should have, if you happen to be concerned about Israel, either because you live there, like you, or because it's just part of your culture, history, background, like me, then you want the state of Israel, the community, the state, to be as best as possible. You're in favor of Tikkun Olam, starting with Israel and every other country. Okay. If you have interested in, if you have a special interest in Luxembourg, you want Luxembourg to live up to the best ideals and so on.
So you have a special interest in the community of Israel as part of your heritage, and what you and you consider your work and I think that you have a very harsh, very strong, and in some ways true critics for the Israeli policy. And this is part of your, listen, I want Israel to be as best as it can be. The community, not the state as soil and sand. Yes?
I'm not sure exactly what you're driving at, but it's true that it's part of, as I said, starting with my childhood, reading Hebrew with my father every night. That's a part of my life ever since then. So of course I want the state to live up to the best values and ideals. And I'm very different from Yeshayahu Leibovitz, but on that we agreed.
No, when I hear, for example, Hassan Nasrallah said something bad about Israel, and you say something bad about Israel, I need to say, listen, these are two separate things. Hassan Nasrallah wants to exterminate, to kill, to make the state of Israel gone forever, but Noam Chomsky is a different guy. He wants the state of Israel to be better. Okay? This is how I should treat critics from you.
I should clarify from in the 1940s, before the state was established, I was a very active Zionist youth leader, Hebrew revival of Hebrew, Zionism, and so on.
Considered to move to the kibbutz.
But I was opposed to a Jewish state. You have to remember that in the 1940s, you could be an active Zionist and think a Jewish state is a bad idea. I still think that. I still think the same thing. I don't think a Jewish state or a Christian state or a Muslim state or any of these things should exist. There should be communities, not even in favor of states. Like if state systems erode, I think that can be beneficial. I should tell you one of my experiences when I lived in Israel for a while, 70 years ago.
It is very different now, Noam, very different now.
Very different. I was in a kibbutz at the time for a couple of months, and I was in my 20s, young person. I was hiking up in the northern Galilee one evening, and a Jeep pulled up in a road behind me, and somebody got out of the Jeep and started yelling at me to come back. I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "You've crossed into Lebanon." Okay. At that point, there was no Lebanon-Israel border. Now, of course, it's bristling with weapons. That's the way it ought to be. The Lebanon-Israel border is completely artificial. It was established by British imperialism, British and French imperialism, like almost all borders in the world. If these borders were to erode, I think it would be very beneficial to everyone. So to the extent, let's take Europe. For centuries, the main goal of Europeans was to slaughter each other, massive slaughter. 17th century, 30 years war, about probably a third of the population of Germany was wiped out over religious disputes. Well, 1945, that ended. Since then, Europe has moved slowly towards erosion of state borders. There's some positive, some negative aspects of it, but the elimination of the state conflict is a beneficial thing.
Yes,
so
but
I'm in favor of states,
but
let
if
alone a Jewish state.
but if
That doesn't mean I'm any different in attitude toward what should happen to the community of people there than I was 70 years ago.
But many people who say, okay, I hear what Chomsky says, and then he reads The Strange Jests of Europe by Douglas Murray and say, maybe Chomsky just speak about him and people like him, but if you ignore, but if you abolish the concept of state, what will happen is what happened in Europe. And this is, and according to Douglas Murray, the strange death of Europe is part because, we abandon the concept of states. Yes, but okay, this is like a big discussion and your time is so precious. So with your permission, let me go to two other questions, okay? Now,
let me mention one other example of elimination of states. The place I live, the country in which I live is called the United States. Well, until 1860, it was plural. These were the United States, different states happened to be united. There was a horrible war, one of the worst wars of modern history, which turned it into singular. Now the United States is, not the United States are.
Yes, but it didn't succeed with Canada, it didn't succeed with Mexico. So we might say that, listen, the people in the United States, from the south to the north, encapsulate a different psyche, which is different than the people in Canada and the people in Mexico. Therefore, we don't have America as a whole. We have United States, we have Mexico, we have Canada, and therefore.
Well, let's take a closer look at that. I happen to live not far from the Mexican border in an area that was conquered in a brutal war of aggression in which the United States conquered half of Mexico. Now, up until the 1960s, it's not that far back, people used to cross pretty freely across that artificial border. Mexicans would come to work in the fields in California, picking fruit and so on. And then they'd go back and live with their families. And then they'd come back and they work seasonal work here. The border was pretty porous. An immigration law was passed in 1965, which prevented that, which made the border rigid. Bill Clinton came along, militarized the border for the first time. Now it's a very hostile, brutal place. People fleeing from horrible circumstances in Central America are criminalized brutally when they reach the border, not even given their legally required rights of asylums. That's a step backwards. The free passage, relatively free passage across the border was much more civilized.
Now, okay, and this is a good point to raise, and another point to raise against it is like a chicken-egg question, which comes first? And you are absolutely right that borders do make some tension. The only question that we as conservative ask is, what's the alternative? Is maybe sometimes the alternative even worse. Wow, that was great. I would love to see you join our great channels community. Come, check it out.